I do not know what qualifies me to be the choice speaker at this maiden lecture. I honestly don't know, but I am truly delighted to be here. I think it's a great honor, and I am thankful for the privilege and the honor to be the maiden lecturer. But I'm delighted to be here for many reasons, not the least of which is the fact that it seems like a reconnection with my old parish, the legal profession. After 21 years in another parish, it is truly heartwarming to reconnect. Thank you for welcoming me. The other reason, of course, is that I have very, very fond memories of my interactions with the body of benchers. And so, the theme of today, which is to reflect on the half a century of the existence of this very august body, looking at its past, its present, and projecting the future, I think all of this can be done within the context of 7 short stories that I intend to share, because a lot of the history of this body is buried in the infinite womb of history. So I will share a few stories, and I hope in doing so that I will do some justice, provoke some thinking for the panelists who will then take it off from there. So my first story is about my interactions with 3 members of the body of benchers back in the 80s when I was seeking admission to become a member of the profession. And the first of them was the late Chief Debo Akode. I had served in his chambers in the fulfillment of one of the conditions for admission to the bar, which is the law office attachment. And therefore, he had very little difficulty in being my sponsor, one of the 2 sponsors the conditions required me to have to be eligible for call to the bar. And so it became then the responsibility to find a second sponsor. And my late father very, very quickly tapped late Chief T.A.B. Oki, S.A., and said, let's go and meet Chief Bankole Oki. And what he did, after Chief Debo Akode had signed, he took my form and took it to Chief T.A.B. Oki. And Chief T.A.B. Oki said, I know you. I know your own father, but I don't know your son. So I will not sign. And I tell this story first because Chief Debo Akode had observed me for several weeks in his law firm. So it was easy for him to sign. Chief T.A.B. Oki, I had no connection with. So he told my father, tell him to come and see me. And tell him to come at this time. So I got there like 10 minutes ahead of time. I was lucky. And then he made me undergo an interview as if I was looking for a job. After that, he still didn't seem quite satisfied. So he said to me, I'm very, very reluctant. I don't know you. And this is a very, very serious profession. I know your father and I know your grandfather, but I don't know you. So you must write me an undertaking. And he extracted a written undertaking from me to be of good behavior. And in his words, be like your father, because I can vouch for him. So I share these stories first to ask whether benchers still take this pain to scrutinize what passes through them into the profession. Of course, the third bencher, Mr. Weber Egbe, QCSAN, now also of blessed memory. He was chairman for the 1988-89 year of the body of benchers. He presided at my call to bar on the 2nd of November, 1988. He said many things in the speech that he delivered. And like many of my colleagues that night, we were too excited waiting to be asked to don our wigs. We barely heard or recollect what he said. But I recollect something he said, and it has stayed with me till today. And I recall he said words to this effect, that all our lives, from our parents, from teachers, from guardians, and persons who were standing in local parentage to us, we had been under some kind of yoke of imposed discipline. And that yoke was ending that night. We were now adults. We were now members of the bar, eminently so. But that we were still going to need discipline. And that we were going to now have to look for the hardest discipline possible, the self-imposed discipline. And that those who find it will not miss the way. Those words have remained with me till today. But these are the interactions that I hold on to with fond memories of my relationship with this body back then. And they represent perhaps the essence and the reason why the body itself came into being. And I've chosen to start here because I think it illustrates the profundity and the importance of the functions of this body, which is to regulate the admission of persons into the legal profession and also to exercise disciplinary jurisdiction over legal practitioners and so on and so forth as prescribed in the Legal Practitioners Act, laws of the Federation. It is a big responsibility, a very big one. Essentially, this body is tasked with the problems that face nations across the world, human capital development. If anyone of unsuitable character, quality or integrity or competence slips through the cracks, this body has inadvertently created a poor quality lawyer, possibly a potential poor quality law teacher, possibly a potential poor prosecutor, possibly a potential poor judge, a potential poor legal advisor, a potential law officer, and so on and so forth. It will become a grave danger for the system of administration of justice. And in the system of administration of justice, I dare say the stakes are high, very, very high. They affect lives and they affect livelihoods. Think of all the work that we do as lawyers. We're taking decisions on behalf of people. Estates may be lost. Lives may be lost. Families may be destroyed. Nations may be brought to their knees. That is the work of this body. So I have recalled the story of these three gentlemen, late Chief Deborah Kode, late Chief Bankole Oki, and Mr. Weber Egbe QCSN, to relate our minds and attention to events that concern me and my generation at the time, over 3 decades ago. That is one entire generation, if you like. At that time, in 1988, when I then enrolled, I was number 10,550 on the roll of the Supreme Court. And this is why I think we must just stand back and ask ourselves, can this continue? So I made a note here. You know, there was a time when police prosecutors, until the Supreme Court intervened, were the ones in magistrates' court. Those police prosecutors have more experience about courtroom usages, languages, and norms and cultures than those 5,000 students that will graduate. I dare say especially those of them who want to be advocates. And I don't think there's anything compulsory if you finish with your LLB. There's nothing compulsory. I mean, we must take the compulsion out of law school, if there is one. There's a sense that, okay, you must go to the law school. Some have opted not to. If you want to graduate as a lawyer and then go and produce movies, leave the barristers alone. And we must have that conversation, and I hope it would evolve from this. But just to make the point about overblow and practice and usages, to say that some of the best lawyers and judges of repute that this country has produced have worked parts similar to that of overblow. They either serve as court clerks or registrars before going further on to then train as lawyers. Clearly, there's a lot to learn about what I think are gaps in how we train lawyers. What we seem to have focused on, I submit, is that we are focused on the academic part. If we look at what the Bar Standards Board, who regulate the profession in England and Wales, do, there are 3 stages. There's the academic part, there's the vocational part, and then there's the pupillage part before a barrister can appear in court. And I've drawn an analogy here to ask ourselves, how many of us really will allow a medical doctor who just came out of medical school to perform surgery on us? Is there anybody here who will allow that? Because they don't do it. And they're a profession like ours, dealing with lives and livelihoods. They spend 3 years of their training doing clinical work. After that, they do housemanship. Even after housemanship, they can't touch patients. They are now under supervision by registrars, who is supervised by a senior registrar. I think between registrar and senior registrar is when you are even able, as a doctor, after all of the 7 years, to be able to certify a person dead. And we are unleashing 5,000 people, and, so I stop there. I think I have made my point. So I pose the other question that we must ask. I've asked 2. The third one is, should we retain the law school as an institution of training? And please, let me make that point again. Should the law school continue to be an institution of training for advocates? Perhaps, maybe, for solicitors. Because I learned a lot from the late C.O. Adubi and the late Dr. Abayomi in drafting. So perhaps, the advocates, I think we now have enough members of the body of benchers, body of senior advocates who have law firms, and I'm going to make that recommendation. But I think that maybe the law school will be better served for advocates as an examining and certification body. Just something aching. I don't think that there's a school of accountancy. But there's ICANN. And you have to pass through the examination and then receive and then go and learn your skills. So those are my thoughts. And I admit that those thoughts are not perfect, but I believe that the time for change and reform was yesterday. If we are to remake the system of administration of justice, we must start with the people who get to operate the system. Competence is key, and it is from competence, I argue, that we can set standards, and it is when we set standards that non-compliance can be easily detectable and sanctioned. I regret to say that today, one is hard put to see the wood from the trees in the difference between incompetence and misconduct in some judicial outcomes. The skill of barristers and those of them who become judges and their level of competence must account in some way for cases that are based solely on documents. Why should cases based on documents last more than 12 months in a courtroom? All the documents are in. We've put all sorts of fast-track processes. Witnesses have sworn affidavits. They have adopted them. What is the case doing? Why is it taking more than 12 months? And if you find some of the things I have found, lawyers are not sure, so they start obfuscating, trying to adjourn, and so on. And nothing seems to be happening in a very strongly corrective way to stop this. And I will connect this eventually to my conclusions. But I just want to say that there's the other side of the work of the body, and before I conclude, I must mention it, which is the responsibility for discipline of legal practitioners, except judges. So, and this is also a very important responsibility, and the future of the profession, and by extension, that of the body itself, in my view, depends on how this responsibility is discharged. I say that when quality control fails and a bad product enters society, what is the power of recall or remediation that the body of benchers exercises to remedy the situation? I am aware, and many of us here are aware, that the LPDC has tried and dispensed with some high-profile cases. I am also glad to learn from the chairman, Asiwaju Adigboyega Awomolo, that there is going to be, as we have heard today, a public presentation of the reports of the directions of the LPDC, and this is quite commendable and must be applauded if you care. Because if you look for the equivalent of that disciplinary committee, the UK Disciplinary Tribunal, you will see most of their directions published online. And there are quite not a few familiar names there. Let me leave it that way. But just one quick point. A colleague of mine who practices across here and the UK once told me that he appeared before a court, and in the course of his submission, the judge asked him, look, sir, are you aware of the recent decision of the UK Court of Appeal on this matter, similar to this? He said, no. He said, okay, let me send down the case for you for a few hours, go into the library, and we will reconvene. He said immediately he came back, he said he was abandoning the argument because he knew that if he pursued it, he might be referred to the committee tribunal and he might lose his license to practice. So do we have those high standards here? So what is the body doing about it? Maybe the panelists will take this from here. Now, when is the body going to set and enforce, let me say, new rules? I assume that some rules exist. As the body that admits them to us to the bar, does it lose control of us after we have been admitted? So when are we going to set rules or new rules for our colleagues who try cases on television? At the time I was in this parish, it was anathema to go on television and be discussing cases. Then they are quoting judgments on TV. So when can a judge also unilaterally refer a petition for unethical conduct, for just delaying a case deliberately to the disciplinary committee? When is that power going to come? The power that my friend ran away from in the UK when he abandoned his argument and said, I throw in the towel. So as a regulator, Does the body of benchers issue a written code of conduct for barristers? Or are we still guided by what we learned in the law school, professional ethics and conduct? Is that still what prevails? I've been away for a while. So are there also laymen and non-lawyers, non-benchers, who are assisting or contributing to the work of the body in her various committees? If we are serving the public, is it not time to listen to them in an interactive way about how we are doing this work? They're not necessarily our members, but they can contribute to committees. There's something to be learned from what is going on in other jurisdictions, and this kind of thing is going on. I know that there are all sorts of critics, but I think also I would urge that reform-minded critics should be brought closer. Let us listen to them. There may be something to take away from them. To the extent that public confidence is critical to the reputation of the justice system, I think these are matters that I would urge for consideration. I'm almost done. Mr. Vice President, please bear with me. I'm sorry. But as I was preparing this intervention, my colleague, Olariwaju Akinshola, sent me a monograph containing a speech titled The Future of the Bar in Nigeria. And I think that it bears relevance to the last part. I have discussed the past, the present, and I just moved to the future now. And the speech was published in the Nigerian Bar Journal. I'm not sure if it's still published. It was delivered at the time when, according to the speaker, there were about 600 members of the bar in Nigeria. The speaker was none other than Sir Adetokunbo Ademola. Let me just really deal with what he said and then come to my own conclusions. He referred to the role that men like Shakpara Williams, Egerton Shingu, Sir Kitori Ajasa, and Sir Adeyemo Alakija had played in the struggle for Nigeria's independence. He then proceeded to say, amongst other things, and I quote him, "Now that you members of the Nigerian Bar Association have for the first time met in conclave, it is not surprising that the minds of many of you should turn towards the future of this country. By your actions and by your ingenuity, the bar can wield a very great influence in shaping the future of this country. The greatness of any country is in its legal system." End of quote. I will add my own words to those great words by simply saying that a poor bar portends a poor future, and a good bar portends a better future. And this must be the imperative for members of the body, not only to keep their hands firmly placed on the regulatory door of admission to the bar. They must also now lead a crusade of urgency to remove unsuitable persons and characters before they bring the house down. So, my remaining 3 stories are short, and I will just share with you some of the things I shared at the annual conference of Egbe Amofin Odua in Lagos last year. And when I shared them, people were surprised to hear them and the connection within our development. But they were the direct result of the handiwork of our colleagues. So the first one, the Geometric Power Project in Aba. And I think my learned friend, Tokunbo Kayode, might know some of the background history, because it was in the administration in which he served. Needless to say, the whole country was looking for power. The operation of the power was mired in a court dispute. And that power project could not come on because it was in court. Luckily, the immediate vice president and I intervened, got the matter out, and I still saw a few days ago the letter of invitation by Mr. Raji. He did a commission the project because he was grateful that at least we could extract the case from court and they could then deal with the commercial issues. Those who are familiar with the power sector of Nigeria will recall the 700 megawatt Zungeru hydropower plant in Niger State. The long and short of that story is that we went to China Exim Bank to borrow money to build a 700 megawatt power plant. Somewhere in between, in a very unclear relationship till today to me, one of our colleagues got involved, and he was being owed his fees by some of the contracting parties here in Nigeria. He went to a high court here, got an injunction, sued China Exim Bank, the people lending us money, and injuncted them from releasing the project fund until his own fees were paid. And again, it was when I took office as Minister of Power that we resolved this dispute. And happily, the project was completed somewhere in the life of the last and this present administration. And I think a substantial amount of that 700 megawatt is part of what we benefit from. But I'm trying to connect dots between what we do, how the justice system responds, and the future and the quality of development that we experience as a people. The last experience is the Ikeja Mall, the ShopRite Mall. Those who are familiar with Lagos will know that mall near the Secretariat. So there was only one mall in Lagos, in Lekki. And we were trying to get the developer, when I was governor, to come and do another development in Lekki, in Ikeja. Lekki was a runaway success story, but we felt that Ikeja also had its own appeal. The land on which that mall currently stands today used to be the warehouse of the Lagos State Judiciary for the bailiffs. That was where they kept goods. So we acquired that land from the Chief Judge in exchange for another one in Agege. All through that period, and all through the period when the construction was going on, there was no court case. On the morning when the mall was supposed to open, when people had been employed, goods had been put in the mall, and we were going to have the grand opening, I heard that there was a motion ex parte for injunction not to open the mall. But to the credit of the Lagos judiciary, who understood our policy of private-public partnership and the risk to it, my Lord Justice Phillips then was Chief Judge. She stepped in quickly and said, there will be no injunction. I order accelerated hearing. Come and put your witnesses in the box. Till today, there has been no case. But you can only imagine what would have happened. Maybe that mall would have been a mirage today. Because as I speak, at least when I left office in 2023, we were trying to resolve a case, a land case, 11 years, where a developer is trying to build a multi-story development in Lagos, and it is still in court. And if you connect these dots for the possibilities of the future and development of the country, I think the case I am trying to make becomes now very self-evident. So this meeting is our golden moment to start a new journey for the Nigerian legal system by demonstrating that there are internal self-correcting mechanisms that ensure that the dispensation of justice is speedy, is credible, and is reliable. By reforming the training process of persons called to the bar, as distinct from solicitors, we can secure a prosperous future for the legal profession that is anchored on sound ethical foundations of competence, character, and I dare say integrity. This is the hard but necessary road of the journey to restoring public confidence in the Nigerian legal system and our very, very noble profession. At this point, I want to thank you again for your kind attention and for inviting me.